Today's Mass readings and Gospel reflection. January 15, 2021. The Friday of the first week in Ordinary Time. First reading. A reading from the letter to the Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 4 verse 1 to 5 and 11. Let us be on our guard while the promise of entering into his rest remains, that none of you seem to have failed. For in fact we have received the good news just as our ancestors did. But the word that they heard did not profit them, for they were not united in faith with those who listened. For we who believed enter into that rest, just as he has said, "As I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest." And yet his works were accomplished at the foundation of the world. For he has spoken somewhere about the seventh day in this manner, "And God rested on the seventh day from all his works." And again, in the previously mentioned place, "They shall not enter into my rest." Therefore, let us strive to enter into that rest, so that no one may fall after the same example of disobedience. The Word of the Lord. Responsorial Psalm. Psalms chapter 78 verse 3, 4 BC, 6c to 7 and 8. Let our response be, "Do not forget the works of the Lord." What we have heard and know, and what our fathers have declared to us, we will declare to the generation to come the glorious deeds of the Lord and his strength. Response: do not forget the works of the Lord, that they too may rise and declare to their sons that they should put their hope in God, and not forget the deeds of God but keep his commands. Response: do not forget the works of the Lord, and not be like their fathers, a generation wayward and rebellious, a generation that kept not its heart steadfast nor its spirit faithful toward God. Response: do not forget the works of the Lord. Gospel reading. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Mark chapter 2 verse 1 to 12. When Jesus returned to Capernaum after some days, it became known that he was at home. Many gathered together so that there was no longer room for them, not even around the door. And he preached the word to them. They came bringing to him a paralytic carried by 4 men. Unable to get near Jesus because of the crowd, they opened up the roof above him. After they had broken through, they let down the mat on which the paralytic was lying. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to him, "Child, your sins are forgiven." Now some of the scribes were sitting there asking themselves, "Why does this man speak that way? He is blaspheming. Who but God alone can forgive sins?" Jesus immediately knew in his mind what they were thinking to themselves. So he said, "Why are you thinking such things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Rise, pick up your mat and walk'? But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority to forgive sins on earth," he said to the paralytic, "I say to you, rise, pick up your mat, and go home." He rose, picked up his mat at once, and went away in the sight of everyone. They were all astounded and glorified God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." The Gospel of the Lord. Before we proceed with the video, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Also, please hit the notification bell, so you won't miss out when we release new videos. Feel free to share your comments, suggestions, and reflections at the comments section down below. Thank you and God bless. Now, let's proceed with the video. The reflection on today's Gospel. Mark shows how the good news of God should be prepared and spread. A community faithful to the gospel lives values which can be in contradiction to the interests of the unjust society which surrounds it. This is why one of the effects of the proclamation of the good news is the conflict with those who defend the interests of the unjust society. Mark gathers together 5 conflicts which the proclamation of the good news brought to Jesus. In the year 70, the time when he wrote his gospel, there were many conflicts in the life of the communities, but they did not always know how to behave before the accusations which they received from the Roman authorities and from the Jewish leaders. This series of 5 conflicts served as a guide to the communities, those of the past as well as those of today. Conflict is not an incident along the road. It forms part of the journey. The solidarity of the friends of the paralytic obtains the forgiveness of sins. Jesus is returning to Capernaum. Many people gather before the door of the house. He accepts everybody and begins to teach them. To teach, to speak of God, was what Jesus did the most. A paralytic, carried by 4 friends, arrived. Jesus is their only hope. They do not doubt about going up, and they make an opening in the roof over the place where Jesus was. It must have been a poor house, with the roof being just mud covered with leaves. They lowered the stretcher with the man to Jesus. Jesus, seeing their faith, says to the paralytic, "Your sins are forgiven you." At that time people thought that physical defects were a punishment from God for any sin that had been committed. The doctors of the law taught that the person remained impure and therefore incapable of getting close to God. For this reason, the sick, the poor, the paralytics felt that they were rejected by God. But Jesus did not think this way. Such a great faith was a sign that the paralytic was accepted by God. And for this reason, he declares, "Your sins are forgiven you." With this affirmation, Jesus denies that the paralysis was a punishment due to the sin of the man. Jesus is accused of blasphemy by those who held power. The affirmation of Jesus was contrary to the catechism of the time. It was not in accordance with the idea that they had of God. And because of this they react against and accuse Jesus. He blasphemes. According to them, only God could forgive sins. And only the priest could declare someone forgiven and purified. How could it be that Jesus, a man without studies, a lay person, a simple carpenter, could declare people forgiven and purified of their sins? There was also another reason which pushed them to criticize Jesus. They had thought, if it is true what Jesus says, we will lose our power. We will lose our source of income. By curing, Jesus shows that he also has the power to forgive sins. Jesus perceives the criticism. This is why he asks, which of these is easier to say to the paralytic, "Your sins are forgiven you," or to say, "Get up, pick up your stretcher and walk"? It is easier to say, "Your sins are forgiven you," because nobody can verify if the sins have truly been forgiven or not. But if I tell him, "Get up and walk," there, all can see if I have or don't have the power to heal. In order to show that he had the power to forgive sins, in the name of God, Jesus says to the paralytic, "Get up, take up your stretcher and go off home." He cures the man. The leaders were confronted with a dilemma. Either their teaching was wrong and sickness is not related to sin, or Jesus had the power to forgive sins, proven by their own teaching. Thus, through a miracle, he taught that the paralysis of the man was not a punishment from God, and he showed that the faith of the poor is a proof that God accepts them in his love. The message of the miracle and the reaction of people. The paralytic gets up, he takes his stretcher, and begins to walk, and all say, "We have never seen anything like this." This miracle reveals 3 very important things. The sicknesses of people are not a punishment for sins. Jesus opens a new way to reach God. What the system called impurity was no more an obstacle for people to get close to God. The face of God revealed through the attitude of Jesus was different from the severe face of God revealed by the attitude of the doctors. This reminds us of what a drug addict said once he had recovered and who is now a member of a community in Curitiba, Brazil. "I grew up in the Catholic religion. I abandoned it. My parents were good practicing Catholics and wanted us, their children, to be like them. People were obliged always to go to church, every Sunday and every feast day. And when one did not go, they would say, 'God will punish you.' I went because this was imposed upon me. And when I became an adult, I no longer went to Mass. I did not like the God of my parents. I could not understand that God, the creator of the world, could extend over me, a small child, threatening me with the punishment of hell. I liked much more the God of my uncle who never went to church, but who every day, and I repeat, every day, bought twice as much bread than what he ate, in order to give to the poor." Do you like the God of the uncle or the God of the parents of the ex-drug addict? Which is the face of God that others discover in my behavior? What we have heard and know, what our ancestors have told us, we shall not conceal from their descendants, but will tell to a generation still to come, the praises of Yahweh, His power, the wonderful deeds He has done.